Welcome to the Theory of DFS podcast. I'm Jordan Cooper, the author, co-instructor of the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. It's a 15-hour audio masterclass that you can pick up at theoryofdfs.com. It's all the game theory, all the ins and outs of playing daily fantasy sports. Doesn't matter the sport. NBA's coming back, right? We're back in the NBA season. NFL, PGA, MMA. It doesn't matter. Essentially, DFS is one big math problem, and I teach you how to solve it. So go to theoryofdfs.com and pick that up. Join with me is a higher stakes, small field, single entry specialist. Which to be fair, Eric, I dipped my toes in the water kind of this past slate. You'll be proud of me. It's Erik Beimfohr. You can find him at Erik Beimfohr on Twitter, but. This was the first NFL slate of the year that I didn't like multi-enter or anything. I mean, I played 18 lineups, so it's still not I didn't play one lineup in a $1,500 contest, but this week the DraftKings had the $10 milli, which cut down on the $9 slant, and I didn't want to. I typically don't play the milli, so I didn't. And then the slant became less of a priority. And then I look in the lobby and I go, like, what the fuck am I playing then? And then they made the spies double spies because they had another it contradicted with another contest. So I'm like, you know what I'm going to do? You know, the $33 5 max, I'll play 5 entries into that. I'll play each double spy. There were 2 red zones. There was a $50 single entry. Then you had the power sweep. Then there were 2 power sweeps, 100K to first, 50K to first. I played 2 entries into each. So that's 150. So, like, I'm still playing contests that are like 1,000 to 4,000, entries, not 50,000 to 100,000. But they're still not like 100 to 200, like not that small. So, and I pretty much hand built. I always say pretty much hand built because I still go through lineups on Lineup HQ, on Roto. I still look at projections and do all that type of stuff, and then I look and I go, okay, that makes sense. And then I use my thumbs and go, let me match that to this, or I just copy the CSV over or whatever. But it's a much more interesting thought process. I mean, I've said this before to you that when I play 100 lineups, I'm like, so I have some Darnell Mooney, right? So I have one lineup with Darnell Mooney in it, and that's what it is. When you're building like 18 lineups, it's kind of like, well, he doesn't make the cut, so just do I have Dalvin Cook in this lineup? Yeah, I could play Darnell Mooney, but he doesn't fit in this lineup, so just screw it. I don't have him. It makes you really, I would say think more about your lineups. But I understand how you could build like 1 to 3 lineups and spend like 3 days thinking about it.
Yeah, because those cutoffs are so close, and they really don't matter. Like from is this guy a better play? Like how people will think of, like the casual player will think about it. That doesn't really matter, but you have to develop some conviction. You have to draw a line somewhere over, especially whether it's one team. That's obviously incredibly difficult. But even I played 5 this week. I had some tickets and stuff, and the same thing as you. I kind of hated the contest this week, so it's probably fitting. I got dusted. That I hated all the contests.
So you got dusted. I was going to come to celebrate because I had 5 losing weeks in a row, and I finally I made some money.
Yeah, well, I won. I started winning, and the DFS gods realized we can't let this guy get too cocky, having multiple winning weeks and winning days. I won in college football. was winning in NBA preseason, so I'm feeling all great coming into NFL. And of course, NFL just puts you right back in your place. I mean, my lineups were horrible. There was never really even a chance. But I kind of hated the contest too, so I struggled a little bit with the contest selection because it was similar, same thing as you, but the opposite. It was outside my normal comfort zone. They had the $1,500 milli, which kind of took the place of the majority of the high stakes contests. They did have some other high stakes contests, but I really hated either the payouts or the size or whatever. And then I was already making multiple. Like I said, I had some tickets, and then I was making multiple for some things like the double spy and the power sweep and some of the 5 max stuff. And then so I didn't want to I'm not trying to overextend. I didn't want to start dumping multiple teams into more higher stakes contests. So it just became kind of a weird week contest wise for me. And I was in a lot of the 1,000 to 5,000 person contests, which, I do play some of that, but I really try to focus on, as small as I can get. 500 and under usually is really kind of my sweet spot. So, I ended up a little bit out of my comfort zone, making, 5 teams and in kind of a little bit different contests. And I don't think it really changed that much. It changed a little bit, like just the thought process for how I was trying to build things. But I mean, I just got everything wrong. Like, it didn't really matter. I got everything wrong.
Well, I was going to say that for me, I got most of the stuff right. So
Yeah.
we must have done some different stuff out there. I think this past slate highlighted very much that if you're out there, you should never do the late news snooze. Right? Because we had one of those instances, and you don't get often. You get maybe once a year in NFL,
It was crazy, yeah.
where we're in a surprise inactive, like really flips the slate on its head, right? If we would have known, if the DFS community, if everyone out there would have known that Ezekiel Elliott would be inactive for this game, Tony Pollard would have been the chalkiest player on the entire slate.
Yep.
And I have it right up here. In the main event Millie, which is the $1,500 millionaire, whatever the big one was on DK, with obviously sharper players. I mean, Tony Pollard was 31.6% owned. The 20 max $3 play action, 9.5% owned.
Oh my God.
Right? And the regular Millie was 12% owned. I mean, like it's a matter of if it was Wednesday, like Pollard's 40% owned everywhere, right? Fournette's ownership goes down, and even Derrick Henry's ownership goes down, and Kamara's ownership goes, because once you take away Ezekiel Elliott and you put Tony Pollard with virtually no backup, and you give him 85% of the snaps, which includes like 14% of the targets. And they may not be efficient targets from Dalton as much, but and then in the matchup that they're in, that's not difficult. Like at 5,200, Pollard becomes the top point per dollar play on the entire slate. I mean, that's what ends up happening. I had someone DM me, and they were wondering how I got Pollard into my lineup, because when they looked, he was like the 17th ranked running back. I said, I don't know what you looked at, but once Ezekiel Elliott was ruled out, he's the number 1 running back. You have to pay attention to this. I mean, especially when we have he's on a bum leg and maybe he's having calf problems. It does. I mean, even the tweets at midnight, it's like they expect him to play, but you never know. We also had the Jakeem Grant, Devontae Parker, and Mike Gesicki are all inactive. All basically the top 3 the target share guys from the Dolphins are gone. So you have to look and go, well, who the hell's catching the ball? Now, yes, it's a horrible game environment. Like that Patriots-Dolphins game was the lowest total and the slowest game. But every player in that game, on the Dolphins side, is under 4K. So Lynn Bowden, I guess, is wide receiver 1 now. I mean, Isaiah Ford's there, and then you have to obviously have Durham Smythe. Salvin Ahmed, sure, for the running game, but I mean, someone's getting past. Something's going to happen. It didn't make Lynn Bowden to be a screaming value or anything, but it's someone that I didn't even consider 10 minutes preview. I mean, he wasn't even on my radar of I'm not playing any Dolphins this late. And then it's okay, now I have to look at this. So, I mean, this highlights that, yes, although it doesn't happen often, that an inactive changes the slate that much. Because we've seen, is Julio going to play? Is Julio not going to play? Oh, Julio's out. But Ridley's already 7,800. So, yes, it bumps his projection up. But, not to that much. To an extent where, he's still 7,800. I mean, he just becomes, now he's better than DeAndre Hopkins versus the other way around type of thing. And I mean, I know I'm preaching to the choir here. I'm assuming people that are listening to this podcast are on YouTube, hitting that thumbs up button and hitting the subscribe and the notification bell. Like know this. Like an NBA, if this was NBA, people wouldn't be right, but people wouldn't be shocked that 10 minutes before lock something happens. But I think people get content in that, like, oh, unless there's something that you knew before, like it's one of those Brandon Cooks, questionable, maybe. We'll have to see. Like, people know to look for that type of stuff, and I don't think people knew. Not enough people, at least, looked to because that changed. I mean, I built my lineups before 11:30 Eastern for that, and I was playing cheaper running backs. I had lineups with Leonard Fournette paired with Falcons. I had lineups with like T.Y. Hilton or Michael Pittman paired with David Johnson at 5,100. Like, I was trying to I was looking into those cheaper, getting at least one, because I wasn't playing Derrick Henry at all. Like, I just said no. I don't play chalk Derrick Henry. It's at 9,500 especially. Like, get out of here. So I just like, okay, and I have a lot of Kendrick Bourne as a pivot, as basically Ayuk leverage. So obviously, once Pollard becomes available, like, Pollard makes sense in all of those lineups. I have David Johnson, Michael Pittman, and Brandon Ayuk. So I'm like, well, I already have Ayuk in that lineup, so let me change David Johnson into Tony Pollard, and then now Michael Pittman doesn't do anything for me because he's not correlated with any, like, it's just a lone Michael Pitt. I turn like Michael Pittman into Kiki QT, and then move the defense down or something like. I do stuff like that, and it turns out David Johnson actually, had a 27-point game. Like all of them did well. Fournette, got there for his salary on 2 1-yard touchdowns. Pollard got there. I mean, Pollard put up 31 points. So that, obviously I wanted Pollard over Fournette, but I mean, I wasn't playing as much of the expensive running backs. I was playing some Jonathan Taylor. I was doing things like that, but the Pollard news, helped me out almost more than that, because I took out some Jonathan Taylor. I took out some Cam Akers. And Jonathan Taylor put up 19 points or something, but that wasn't good enough for his salary. And obviously Cam Akers got injured and the Rams lost, so that didn't work out. So I built lineups. I had one lineup in the power sweep that I was in like 48th place with 180 with 2 players to go and like 20 points to first place, and I have Alvin Kamara and Tyreek Hill in my lineup. Right? And I'm thinking, okay, like, I have the chalk running back, and I have the correlated $8,800 high ceiling player to go on, because that was the lineup that I played the Ryan Gage Hurst. Like, I played Hurst in the tight end spot, so that means I don't have Kelsey, so I played Kamara and Tyreek Hill across from each other. And Pollard's in that lineup with Ayuk, everything. Corey Davis in there, because I played a ton of Corey Davis. If I'm going to X out Derrick Henry, I'm going to play some other Titan. So, like, to me, my lineups, you could tell, this is why I had a winning week. Now, was it highly profitable? No. But I mean, for past 5 or 6 weeks, I've been losing. So, I'll take a grand or two as profit.
Right.
A little, I'm going to get a little boost, a little, kind of emotional, kind of like, okay, you still got it, kid. But what the hell did you? It feels like I'm describing my lineups, and it's like, oh, okay, like everyone kind of did well enough, and like, who the hell did you play?
So, I'm on the show with Tambo on Sunday morning when all this type of news breaks. So I'm trying to think all this stuff through as it's coming in, and I'm thinking from the small field, sharp players, higher stakes stuff, and I'm thinking, okay, this Tony Pollard, like, and not to get narrative-y, everybody in like those contests, I mean, they freaking love Tony Pollard, right? Everybody hates Zeke. And they use oh my God, they paid Zeke all this money. They have Tony Pollard's the greatest running back ever. So I'm like, okay, Tony Pollard is going to be, and this is just, I think it was like ended up being like compounding mistakes that I made. And I actually don't hate the thought process, but it ended up being mistakes. Like you say it, and we've talked about it. Once I saw ownership and all of that,
So basically, what you're going to get into is kind of is very similar to what we talk about on many of these slates, where you believe that Pollard was actually in the higher stakes stuff going to come in over-owned.
Going to come in crazy popular. Yes.
Right. Okay. But obviously we're kind of on the same page now because I didn't play the play action. I didn't play the Millie. So like I'm playing contests where, Pollard is going to, Pollard was 28% owned, 32% owned, which I still think is, personally, I think is still a little too low.
Too low. It's too low.
Right. But I'm assuming you expected Pollard in something like the double spy to be 55% owned.
Right. And then you get like into the $1,500 Millie or like any of that, the luxury box, any of that kind of stuff. I was thinking, definitely like up there with Kamara. Like everybody would just have those guys.
Right. Basically all the Fournette, which I didn't consider to be the greatest of plays to begin with, for a ceiling. I thought he was fine for a medium. If you played him in cash and got 14 points, I think great, but not for first place. But I think that once Pollard became open, like all those Fournette lineups. So to me, did you do that? Did you go, well, everyone's jumping off of Fournette, let me take Fournette? Or you have your mental you hate Fournette anyway. It doesn't matter.
There was no chance I was playing Fournette. And for the brand, I can't play Fournette. I was talking shit on Fournette all week long about how this team made this freaking guy inactive the week before. So I'm, publicly taking a shit on this guy. I can't come back and then play him for the brand, right? So anyway, and I just wasn't going to play Fournette. I'm willing to take that L. That's fine.
But it's not an L. It's not an L. It's a W. Yeah. He got lucky to get 2 touchdowns.
2 1-yard touchdowns.
He looked Garrett Blounted it up. I mean, like that's a suck out.
Tilting. Right. That was way more tilting than the Pollard thing. Like I knew Pollard was a good play. Him getting there is what it is. But the Fournette thing, that was like, come on. So anyway, Pollard, like that's how I'm thinking this thing through, right? I actually had already, like I obviously liked Ayuk, but I knew Ayuk was going to be really popular too. So, and then we also got that Dolphins news. So I'm like, I didn't think Lynn Bowden necessarily was going to be like super popular, but he was another like kind of sexy play that these people, these young, talented rookies or just young players in general. And then, they project point per dollar. Well, these guys, to the Tony Pollards, the Lynn Bowdens, whatever, Brandon Ayuk's, they get crazy popular in these higher stakes, and looking at results DB right now, Bowden did get in the $1,500 in the main event, the $1,500 main event, he did get up to 24%. So, he ended up becoming like the go-to. Manny Sanders was 30 and he was 24. So he became like almost right there with Manny Sanders as like the de facto punt wide receiver. So anyway, I'm thinking all this stuff through about what I think my opponents are going to be doing with what has now opened up. Because like you said, you absolutely have to be paying attention to that news. If you're playing in anything, large field, lower dollar, like I don't think you should have cared. I mean, obviously, as we saw in the play action, Tony Pollard was 9%. That's maybe the most egregious ownership.
Right. Let me tell you, if I was playing my normal 100 to 120 lineups with the slant and the play action, all that type of stuff, I would have had it all entered already in. I would have just redid my CSV and just basically taken Pollard and just say wherever he fits. And if I get like 82% of him, then so be it. Then there you go. That's I'm gonna try to pair. Basically, what I would try to do is try to pair my Pollard to my Ayuk and Bourne stuff. Try to that as much as possible. So like in an optimizer at least, like if I'm trying to set some of these secondary correlations, it will naturally not give me 100% of Pollard if I set my max on like Ayuk and Bourne.
Right.
Like naturally. Like I would still have Pollard in lineups without them. But based on the set, this is what I mean by using an optimizer to do the things that you want it to do. And I could just set a max cap on Pollard at 80%, but I know that with the settings that I currently have in for everything, that it's going to naturally, like I'm going to press build and he's going to show up like 70-something% of the time. And then I have to decide, do I want Pollard in all these lineups? But it's one of those types of things in the lower stakes. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again for basketball. If you're playing in the lower stakes and some late news happens that comes out, the better way to judge on when late news exists is after content. Obviously, if you're watching this show on YouTube, on the podcast, you tend to consume content. If you read an article at 4:00 in the afternoon, and then so and so sits at 6:30, like no one mentioned. If I went through all the fantasy football podcasts of the past week, right? No one mentioned Tony Pollard as a play, right? Right? No, it's not on the top of people's minds even. So it's not even a combination of like, oh, okay, Zeke's inactive. Oh, and if you're not going to go and check like once you check projections, you know, like you don't even have to. Like if you didn't even know the inactives at all, and just said, okay, at 12:30, a half an hour before the slate lock, let me just double check and reload wherever your projection source is. If you don't have your own model, right? RG, Labs, Awesemo, it doesn't matter. And then you see, oh, why is Tony Pollard at the top of this? Then you could infer. Then what? Who cares what the reason is? Yeah. Like just do it. So at the low stakes, I would have slammed him. But I understand your viewpoint of you're treating this as if this news already came out on Wednesday, because that's from the ownership perspective, it's going to be more likely at the higher stakes, smaller field contests to be that way. But you would still agree with me that 31% in the main event millionaire is too low.
Yeah. So that's why I said when the news and stuff came out, and honestly with Ayuk, because I thought that might, boost up a little bit of guys like Ayuk.
So let me get this straight, because you thought Ayuk was chalk, and he was. Mm-hmm. He's the second highest owned wide receiver, and Pollard was chalk, and they're correlated. That the better thing to do is just treat that game like it doesn't exist.
Right, and actually,
or to play like
49ers or Cowboys, yeah.
Right, or play CeeDee Lamb and Kendrick Bourne, like do something like that, if anything.
Yeah. Which I was prioritizing some other games, and getting those secondaries in didn't work. But what did work was playing the defenses from that game. So, playing that was a conviction, if you will, that I had that clearly was god awful. But the 49ers. So now you're getting this super chalky running back. The Cowboys are still bad and still really bad on offense. So have Andy Dalton at quarterback and maybe the worst offensive line in the league. And now you got this running back who I thought was going to be, wildly popular because, and just to reiterate it, you pretty much broke it down. But like you said, in the play action, in the $10 milli, in all those contests, the people are not reacting to this kind of stuff.
Not as many, not no one, but not as many.
Yeah, not as many. Comparatively, right? 9% of the 300,000 people that are in there or whatever have reacted to this Tony Pollard news, because he was 1% or sub 1% before the Ezekiel Elliott news. So all that was people reacting late. Comparatively, when you're in this $1,500 contest, $2,000 contest, and it's smaller field, almost all of the field is reacting. These are all players that are very serious and very sharp, and they are following this news. And so they do know that Tony Pollard is the best play, and especially at running back, when you get a cheap running back that becomes the best screaming value on the slate. Everyone typically in those fields does react, and the ownership is ginormous. And so I believed that everyone would react, everyone would put Tony Pollard in. And they were already going to be playing Brandon Ayuk. So like you said, that game, and there were ways to play that game. Like you said, you could play CeeDee Lamb or Amari or Jordan Reed or whatever. And I considered that a little bit, but it just didn't fit the other things that I was trying to do. And so I wanted to kind of try to bust up that chalk in a very different way. And defense, I didn't really like any. I didn't think there was any defenses that I really cared about, and I like to attack kind of really contrarian, unique defenses. So I went about it that way and tried to 49ers defense against Pollard, and then did a similar thing. The Patriots were actually the defense I really went after the most, Same thing. The Dolphins were going to be trotting out a JV squad, and 25% of the field's going to be playing a wide receiver from that JV squad, and maybe a few of the tight ends or something. I don't know. And so I'm just going to take this defense, this low-owned defense against this JV squad. Clearly, neither of those things worked.
Right. Can I guess your lineup? I'm going to do a weird thing. I didn't know what you played. I didn't look at results DB. I don't even know what contest you're in. Okay, based on how you think, how I know how you
also,
think.
Also, don't look real quick. Don't look, because I had to make some swaps and the teams got even worse than they were.
Okay, well, I didn't look. I never look. Right? I never looked at yours before the show or whatever. Like, a lot of times I'm not looking at the game changer anyway to study anything anyway. So, let me guess. I'm going to take a stab. Okay, you played a stack of Chicago, Minnesota with you did something like Trubisky, Robinson, Kmet, and either Cook or Thielen, Dalvin Cook or Thielen, and then I don't care how you did it, but you somehow got Godwin into your lineup in some fashion, because that's
I didn't. But
you did. Oh, okay. I'm figuring Fournette is chalky, and Godwin, you're always on Godwin, and this seemed like a perfect spot against the Falcons to be on Godwin. So okay, so I got half of it right, because I looked at I played out of 18 lineups, I think I played 2 Trubisky stacks in my lineups, and obviously that didn't really get there.
It was really fun to start. He was lighting it up. Yeah, I had Allen Robinson. Thielen caught the touchdown. I played Thielen. Thielen caught the touchdown on the first drive. I felt like a genius. And then I don't. Nobody besides David Montgomery and I guess he should have played the 2 running backs against each other. It was just handoff fest on both sides. But yeah, that was my favorite game. That was my favorite stack. So clearly that didn't go well. And then I was. Which it kind of changed, obviously, as the news and stuff broke. I did play like DeAndre Hopkins, but I played DeAndre Hopkins with Miles Sanders.
Miles Sanders got like all of the work
and scored 10 fantasy points.
Right, but he had like I think he's played almost every snap.
Yeah, he was my like big, like maybe my biggest conviction of the week was him. Just because and again, it changed a little bit, but I believe that Jalen Hurts would be the one that would, once we got a little bit more running back value with like Pollard, it boosted up like Lamar and Kyler's ownership, and Kyler ended up being really popular. So it changed a little bit. But coming into the week, we didn't have, even with the Saints guys, we didn't have quite that much value. So I kind of thought it would be Hurts would be the one that kind of got elevated. And I really liked just the spot and everything about Miles Sanders and at the ownership that he was going to come at. But he kind of was a little bit quasi leverage, if you will, because of Hurts, and coming in again, this changed a little bit, but coming in, he was right there at the prices with Akers and Jonathan Taylor. And so, he was falling in this no man's land. His quarterback was going to be pretty popular. That game was great. Obviously, he made a secondary correlation with DeAndre Hopkins. So I really don't even feel necessarily bad about like stacking up that Bears game, going with the Miles nuke. The mistake, though, to me was just, yeah, I was wrong about Tony Pollard ownership. I mean, it's not. I don't mean this to sound bad, but it's kind of gave my opponents too much credit. But like the thing is that failed this week, but that has been correct the overwhelming majority of the time. Even on like late news, they will. I mean, look at Lynn Bowden. What was Lynn Bowden's ownership before that news? And I know it's a little different.
2%, 4%, something.
And he got up to like 25. And I'm not saying he was a bad play, because he wasn't. But Tony Pollard was an infinitely better play than that. So I'm like, okay, if Lynn Bowden's going to get to 25, what the hell is Tony Pollard? What is Tony Pollard going to get to? And that was wrong. And at 30% in those contests,
I think it's not about giving too much credit.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the fact, I just want to highlight for the listeners, for the viewers, hit that thumbs up button, hit the subscribe button, always have to mention that. The process in which you evaluated your error was the right way to think about it. Had I known that Pollard was only going to be 31% owned, I should have played him.
Yeah.
But if he came in at 60% owned and still put up 31.2 points, I'd be sitting here going, no, I agree with your fate of him. I agree with it. right? Probably that's if anyone faded Kamara at 67% ownership, like that's probably the level where you do it at. The play actually was 35% owned. So that's, I mean, we've been talking about this all seasons, that the contest that you're in really dictate that. But I think that you're used to it from an NBA perspective, because obviously this happens like 10 times, 20 times more often. What happens in NBA, it's really a time period thing. Like if it's really late, I jam. No matter what the news is, I just jam it. If it's 10 minutes, 15 minutes before lock, I jam it. If it's an hour and a half before lock, then you start thinking about things. If it's like 4 hours before lock, then typically it's already in content and already in the projection. Like everyone knows this. All right. Like Blake Griffin's out. Giannis is sitting. Kawhi is resting. Like the stuff that we already, even if we didn't know the night before, like we know now. But even with the late news within like the hour, so many people at the this is the difference between low stakes and high stakes. At the high stakes, most people are utilizing projections. So the advantage is limited because you're typically looking at the same thing that everyone else is looking at, right? Even if it's 6:45, it's 15 minutes before lock. You're like, let me update my model. Let me update the projections. Let me look around the industry. What does Basketball Monster have? What does this site have? All that type of stuff. And you go, okay, you could tell that, okay, when this guy is out, this guy, gets a boost type of thing. But a lot of casual players in NBA or bad DFS players, like they make the mistake of who's filling in for the guy. And like they're using his usage from the second unit and superimposing it on the first unit. Like, oh, Terrence Ross is going to get a start for the Magic out of the blue instead of Evan Fournier. But it's like, dude, Terrence Ross has a 27% usage rate. Yeah, on the second team, but now he's competing for shots with Aaron Gordon, Nikola Vucevic. He's never on the court with those guys. So people are like, how do I not play Terrence Ross at 4,500 playing starters minutes? It's like, dude, Terrence Ross plays 26 to 28 minutes as it is, as part of the second unit. So now he's playing 32. He's playing 4 more minutes, but his usage is going to now be 20%. He's not going to be at 27%. So people rush to the replacement and not like, no, this actually, when you take out Fournier and you put in Terrence Ross, like, this is a Markelle Fultz. Yeah. This is now you're taking out the Ross is going to sit in the corner and take threes. Like that's all he's going to do. He's not going to be the usage guy. Vucevic gets a little bit of a boost. Aaron Gordon everyone else. Isaac is getting a boost. Actually, the worst player on the court now is Terrence Ross.
Yeah, that's my favorite situation.
Yeah, but you know what I'm talking about. You'll go into contests and see Terrence Ross is now 36% owned. Because he gets a 4 minutes boost. So, yes, it raises his projection. But it doesn't make him a scream. It's like people just overreact to that. And then I take a look at this and I go, well, everyone's playing this center. And I'm like, I'll just play Nikola Vucevic now at a boosted 2-point median projection. And he's 11% owned when he should be 25% owned. And then he puts up 56 points and people look at me and go, oh, you did the leverage off of Terrence Ross. It's like, I didn't even leverage off of Terrence Ross. I picked the right player based on the news. Yes. You picked the wrong guy.
Yeah, that's my favorite is people will call it leverage. So I definitely like everything that you said. I love then, now who's the guy on the bench, right? So it would like DJ Augustine, Michael Carter-Williams, whatever, somebody that's like that. Like now who's the guy on the bench? Because Ross isn't there chucking every time down the floor. Now that guy's going to chuck every time down the floor. And he's like 3K. So and he's like 5%, and like you said, Ross is 40%. Like I love those situations are like the absolute NBA DFS dream. So yeah, I will say like that is a lot of my mindset is probably based around NBA because that's where you learn like late swap and manipulating that kind of news. You learn that better in NBA. So. I don't even know if I misapplied it this time to this Tony Pollard situation.
I don't. You picked the right. Everyone was picking the right guy. It's just you thought that more people would do that. I mean, like it's when take away Ezekiel Elliott, someone has to play running back. It's not like the NBA where there's some type of usage thing. Like, it's more likely that what I described for NBA is more likely to happen to wide receivers than to running backs. Like, running backs, you play based on opportunity. So, like, even though, like, no one likes David Johnson, once Duke and Procise are out, it's like, well, he's going to play nearly... Buddy Howell's going to play a couple of snaps, and that Phillips guy... But David Johnson is a pass catcher, and he's going to play. I know Watson typically doesn't throw as much to his wide receivers as his running backs, but it's like at 4% owned. At 4% owned, I'll take a shot on David Johnson at 5,100 with 95% of the snaps. So the same thing with running backs. With wide receivers, we see this happen, right? With that NBA example with Terrence Ross happens where let's take a look at the Cowboys for his example. I mean, we could make take a look at the Dolphins, right? Gesicki, everyone goes out and it's like, well, Lynn Bowden, he's going to have 32% of the targets because it's like, dude, they have other players on the, look at the Texans. Will Fuller's out. Oh, you got to play Brandon Cooks. And then this Chad Hansen guy comes out of nowhere off the practice squad. And he's getting 7 targets for 100 yards. And you're like, who is this guy? It's like, yeah, because there's still going to be other receivers out there. Just you can't just take one guy's targets and say it's all going to this guy. McLaurin's out. It's all going to Cam Sims. Like, no, they're just going to, Inman's going to be in there. They're going to rotate other receivers in there. You can't just throw all of the targets into one bucket and say that's where it's going to go. I mean, it's more of a chance that way. You can't just exponentially multiply their target share like that. I think that's what I mean by people do it more for wide receivers than for running backs. But me and you know that, running back is more about volume and opportunity. And that's why I look at Derrick Henry and go, I'm paying Derrick Henry's probably going to touch the ball 25 or so times in this game. And probably maybe at most 2 will be receptions. Yeah. At most, which will give you the PPR points. I could find other guys that are going to get 25 touches for half the price. I mean, not in the best spot or anything like that. So, really, you're paying $9,500 for Derrick Henry's ceiling, not his floor. And when you're paying for a ceiling, that's high variance. And if they're going to be owned, then, I mean, you're doing the same thing when you play Dalvin Cook at 9,000. You're doing the same thing. Pretty much any running back past 6,000 or 7,000, everything past that is just his touchdown variance and 100-yard bonus variance.
Yeah, it's like all touchdown variance pretty much up there. Like Derrick Henry needs, the big play which people fawn over because he does it more frequently. But even then, it's still touchdowns. Even if he gets tackled inside the 5 and doesn't score, the 50-yard, it's 5 points. It's great. But it's not anything special because you're going to need him to do that 8 times to pay off $10,000.
Right, but Tony Pollard coming in and getting 20 to 22 touches, he's 5,200. There's not that much difference. Or
whatever it was, yeah.
The thing that I didn't get this late was why was T.Y. Hilton so owned? Or people just recency buy? This is a guy that at 3,900, no one wanted to play. Right, 3,900. He's 3% owned, and now he's 5,500, and he was one of the chalkiest wide receivers in cash games. And I'm sitting there going, and I'm saying this in my 18 lineups. I did play 2 T.Y. Hilton lineups, but I didn't play him because I wanted to play T.Y. Hilton. I was playing Texans, so I was playing Watson, Cooks, Akins, Hilton. But I played some Pittman because I saw that Hilton was going to be owned. So I'm like, well, who's the leverage off of Hilton? Obviously Pascal was the right answer, but I played Pittman.
Yeah, that's the hard part with the Colts, right? It's just T.Y. is the guy that you feel most comfortable about stealing. So if you're correlating, that makes sense. But they're so difficult. But T.Y. is the anti Pollard thing. So if you go, the higher the stakes you go up, people think like you, and they're like, well, and honestly, 18%, I don't really know why he was even 18%, but, that's 10% lower than the play action. He's 28% in the play action and 18% in the 1500. So like he's like the opposite. People were like, oh, early in the week, T.Y. Hilton, 5,500. He's turned it around, right? Yeah, and it's the Texans. Everybody crushes the Texans.
Oh yeah, the narrative. Oh yeah, the Texans narrative. I forgot about that. Oh yeah.
T.Y. is a lock against the Texans, right? He sucks against everybody else. Doesn't matter how old he gets. He'll be 40 years old, putting up 30 DraftKings points against the Texans. Just ask everybody. But like, yeah, the T.Y. Hilton thing, I don't get. That was probably the most confusing. Well, the Pollard ownership was the most confusing to me. Like I said, I just thought it was. I don't know how, like he didn't become higher owned, but he didn't. And then I also thought, what did you think about like Cam Akers and Jonathan Taylor? Cam Akers I thought was interesting because he got so much hype all week long. Do you think he was one that it was just because obviously the Pollard thing, but even Akers like in the $3 where Pollard didn't get super popular, Akers was 18%, which is pretty owned, but I don't know. I thought Akers would be pretty darn popular, and he was actually pretty low owned at higher stakes. So
no, that's why I played him. I played him in a couple of lineups because I figured with the Pollard news, with basically Pollard, Kamara, like just who loses out here, and like I played Jonathan Taylor because I played like 3 Watson stacks. So I mean I had Jonathan Taylor in those, and I had Cam Akers, and I'm gonna take a shot on Denzel Mims and I'll just have to redact him from my model or something in order to not do that. But I mean, I didn't play I was geared more towards what I was doing, which is what I typically don't do when I build like a lot of lineups, because it's very hard to do so like at the same time in an optimizer. Like I played naked Lamar, I played naked Kyler, and I played naked Jalen Hurts because truthfully my favorite game, if I had to pick a game that I wanted, it was the Cardinals-Eagles game. Mm-hmm. The problem is that, like, outside of Hopkins, like, no one projects well. Like, you have the quarterbacks projecting extremely well and Hopkins projecting extremely well, and then it's like Greg Ward, I don't know, Goddard, Rager, who do I take on the Eagles? And then you look and you go, can I get away with Christian Kirk? And you go, maybe I could get away with Christian Kirk. He doesn't even project well. So I'm looking around and I'm in my head based on my projections. The quarterbacks that had the highest shot of being the top QB1 on the slate was Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, and Jalen Hurts. So like I'm looking at that going, well, why am I I'm playing a Trubisky stack? I'm playing Watson. I'm playing Phillip Rivers in one lineup. And I'm like, what am I doing here? Why can't I just play the same game? I'm playing a 2+1, right? So I'm just playing a wide receiver and an opposing wide receiver. So why don't I, instead of playing Brandon Cooks and Michael Pittman with Watson, why don't I just put Jalen Hurts there and just be like, well, the Eagles get there, but no one, and then in my tight end spot, I go, maybe I could put Goddard there. And then I put Goddard there, and then that doesn't match up with anyone. And then it becomes a mess. And then Murray's also, he's expensive and Hopkins is very expensive. So I'm like, why can't I play Kyler Murray in a Falcons stack instead of playing Hopkins? I'm playing Ridley. Like what makes it that I can't do that with the quarterback that could rush into 2 touchdowns? So when you're hand building like that, it's so much easier to see. And I could still make naked quarterback type lineups in lineup HQ. I just tend to lean away from it because many slates it's not optimal to do that. You'd rather have the correlation. The difference between the lineups, you're not getting enough median. Like you're not like I'm running through lineup HQ with no settings in the beginning just to do research, and I'm seeing so many naked Hurts, naked Murray, naked Lamar lineups that like in order for me to get Goddard in this Hurts lineup, I have to sacrifice like 2 points just to get Goddard in for the core. Like then why am I bothering? To get Hopkins in this lineup, like, do I have to sacrifice? Like, what am I sacrificing? Hopkins at least projected well. Lamar, I have to put Andrews in at 5,500 to correlate, and these lineups are showing up, 3 points below the baseline median. I'm like, do I need? I could have a better lineup without Mark Andrews in it with Lamar than with Mark Andrews. So why? So I'm just So I started building lineups like that. I started going, okay, let me build a lineup without any of these 3 quarterbacks. build the lineup as if I was just, that game didn't exist, and then let's see if I could just switch the quarterback, right? Because I wasn't necessarily playing like 3+1s, like those types. It was always just one skinny stack type of lineups.
Yeah.
So then I saw that, like, out of my 18, I think I have 3 or 4 with naked. Just, it looks like a normal lineup. Just, it's now it's and instead of Deshaun Watson, it's now Kyler Murray up there, right? It's a $200 difference, and I still have Kiki QT and in my, I still have that pseudo stack in there. Just, I have the higher scoring quarterback from the other game.
Yeah, it was interesting because I was kind of planning around very similar to what you did. I was playing Trubisky. I let that failed, but I was outside of Trubisky lineups. I was like everyone was, but I was heavy Saints Chiefs. Which also clearly was a massive whiff. But
I'm surprised. I'm surprised with you because I guess you had to go somewhere because I mean the Saints guys were all chalky.
Yeah. So, but I was going like Kamara was like what Pollard should have been, the unfadable running back for me. Plus, I did really like basically all of the afternoon games. So I did want to keep it outside of my Trubisky stacks, obviously. I wanted to keep as much of that flexibility to kind of see where things were going into the afternoon. Like, okay, everybody busted. If I want to play Manny Sanders, I'll play Manny Sanders. I was mostly on Traquan, and I'm. This is also sometimes when you get stubborn and it burns you. Traquan was, projecting lower owned, like much lower owned than like Manny Sanders and all these other wide receivers. And so Traquan was actually my favorite guy in that game. He allowed me to get. Do you want Tyreek? Got him. Do you want DeAndre Hopkins? Got him. Do you want Kamara, Kelsey, whatever? Traquan was a
right, and it also
kind of path to that.
It also helped you, like Traquan. I thought the same way because Traquan's ownership would go down with the Lynn Bowden news, right?
Exactly,
because now at 3,600, because you already had Gallup. People were playing Gallup in that range, right? People were already playing, obviously Sanders. There were other once Lynn Bowden starts getting 20% ownership, it has to come out of some cheap receiver, and it's most likely going to come out of Traquan Smith. So I get
because
it.
people are already playing Manny Sanders, so now Traquan gets down because they have an alternative to him at cheap. So anyway, everything got all sorts of screwed up once the afternoon came around and I was drawing dead. But I just didn't see a path, which clearly I didn't see the game playing out like it did, in which all these Saints didn't I couldn't see a path in which Traquan, Manny, Kamara, Latavius, Cook, how multiple of these guys didn't pop, and none of them. literally, the path is that Drew Brees it's 10th time for Drew Brees. I think it's go back to Taysom time, but what it allowed me to do was get all the other secondaries that I wanted. I could get Hopkins and Sanders. That was a priority for me, was playing DeAndre Hopkins and Sanders. And then if I wanted to play Jared Cook instead of Kelsey in stacks of that game. Anyway, but what I was planning to do was playing Jalen Hurts or Kyler, and then also kind of stacking up that Saints game, because then, I don't need Breeze, and Mahomes is expensive. I don't need Mahomes to stack that game up. And then I ended up, playing mostly Drew Brees over Jalen Hurts, because I thought Breeze would be the guy that's 2%, and I believed Hurts would be higher, and they ended up in the 1,500, almost the same. So just another horrible mistake. But I was grasping at any way to make up some ground on the field by the time the afternoon games came around. I did consider. Did you? I don't know if you had any teams that were dead at all, but one thing that I feel like I might have whiffed on was considering that Rams stack once I was drawing dead.
No, I played 2 Ram stacks. As I played Goff, Higbee, Woods, that type, as a way to get away from Akers, if Akers, I thought the Rams would be underowned.
Same.
It was one of those things that the team that's facing the Jets, people don't want to play for whatever reason, and then they come in and they blow them out 48 points or something. So I didn't mind Woods, I didn't mind Akers, I didn't mind Higbee. Cup a little less so. I thought Woods was projected higher than I thought Woods was better leverage off of Akers also because Woods gets those jet sweep type of rushes,
Yeah.
type of things. So I don't know. I just thought the Rams were underowned, but I mean, the stacks did not project well.
Mhm.
Like the problem with the Rams was like based on my projections, like once I compound them together, and then once I throw Denzel Mims on the other side or something like that, like
Bad, yeah.
the line, like in order for that lineup to project well, I need to jam in basically Kamara, Pollard, Emmanuel. Like I have to jam in all the chalk in order to get that median up anyway. So like I thought of it more as like I pivoted off or playing Woods as a one off. Like I played Wood like in a spot because Woods was 6,800 and Akers was 6,600. So essentially in my flex, it's like, oh, this is where Akers would be in someone else's lineup. I'm playing Robert Woods because Robert Woods is going to be lower owned, and Robert Woods was 5% owned in the main event Millie and 8% of the play action. So I was right on that, and
Hmm.
obviously Woods had a better game. I mean, Woods had a better game than Kamara, right? You should have switched him out. I mean, I should have
Yeah.
played little Jordan Humphrey. I don't even know who that guy
Yeah.
was.
Right.
All I'm
That's
looking
a
at is like, okay, Latavius Murray is catching the pass that Kamara should be catching on that screen and getting a touchdown. Then Taysom Hill doesn't get in the first time, and I'm like, okay, this is this. Now let's get a real person to get a touchdown. Nope, they just rushing him again, and then Saints got a touchdown. Who's little Jordan Humphrey? Who are they putting on the field now? But in hindsight, we played the Saints in Showdown often enough. They're on
yeah.
primetime games that we should know that, Breeze is in. That means everyone does well now. No, Breeze is in. That means like 8 people could get the ball. Like
Yeah.
you could say whatever you want about Breeze. He had a horrible game. He completed like 30% of his passes. But from a intelligence perspective, like Breeze is one of those quarterbacks. Same for Rivers. I think a lot of people look at these older quarterbacks and go, "Well, they can't throw the ball down the field." Like you're right, but when you view the receivers though, these are quarterbacks that, given enough time in the pocket, they'll go through 4 or 5 reads. Like it's the younger guys where it's like if the first read's not there, I'm chucking the ball. Like it's like it's like first read, dump off. Like you get one of the like it's like if you're the third receiver for a young quarterback or something like that, a lot of times you're out doing wind sprints
Yeah.
because they're not getting to you because they have to react to a line movement and they have to scramble out of the pocket and stuff like that. So I mean, we take a look at the Saints. I mean, take a look at the teams that look. I think I made a revelation. Maybe I didn't. Maybe everyone knew this, and I just came to my attention now. Look at all the teams that we tilt over, not knowing the distribution of targets. Phillip
The old guy
Rivers,
quarter.
Tom Brady, Drew Brees. Like it's all older quarterbacks. It's
Yep.
very experienced potential Hall of Fame quarterbacks because it doesn't matter. Like, so what? Michael Thomas isn't open. I'll find the open guy. Like I don't have to go to my first read. I could audible out. I could do all this type of stuff. And then you take a look at the young quarterbacks and go, well, Dwayne Haskins is in. That means Terry McLaurin's going nuts because like he looks for McLaurin, and if that's it, then that's the first read, and you're done. Like that type of thing.
Yeah.
They're not good throws or anything. Uh, right? You have to deal with that. So yeah, like the shittier quarterbacks tend to lean on. Trubisky's more inclined to lean on Allen Robinson
Hmm.
than like if they had a better quarterback, like maybe Darnell Mooney and Anthony Miller and all those guys would actually have value. Uh, unless you have top wide receivers. I mean, then you have the Cowboys, which is seemingly like the opposite. Like you have great wide receivers and no one to throw the ball.
Yes. Yeah. So I think there was like I sat back and thought about it as I have $0 currently winnings on Sunday afternoon, and I was like, there's I think in general actually like I had to make some really crappy swaps and stuff, so I'm not really evaluating that. But like going in, I was like, okay, look, I know that the Trubisky thing was bad, but I'm still okay with playing that. And then came in with like, okay, I have my theories on how the ownership is going to break out, and I have my favorite kind of secondaries, and I have my favorite main stacks. And I liked your concept of like dropping in Jalen Hurts. Like if I need a cheaper guy, I can drop in Jalen Hurts, or I can play Kyler if I want to play Kyler with Nuke, whatever. Or you can play Lamar, like using that quarterback position kind of interchangeably, depending on what price I need, and dropping in that runner into that lineup, and playing whatever your kind of favorite stacks were. And I actually feel like that plan was fine. That plan didn't work. I mean, oh my God, the winning lineups were pretty wild this week. So I don't think I was ever going to get there. Like, shout out to, I'm not trying to throw shade. Shout out to Chop, having the absolute stone cold nuts on FanDuel and winning another $1 million. But like I could never in like 5 teams find that team. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not even saying it was a bad lineup, but I could never find that team. But he had naked Hurts, and he just found all.
Well, I mean, he had Hopkins in there, so like I played Hurts with Hopkins, so that technically is a
right, and that's what I was going to
correlation.
Do, yeah. So yeah,
I also want to highlight. I said this on the morning grind with Stevie on RG. If you subscribe to that also, because I do the review podcast every Monday, that. The benefits of correlation on FanDuel are so much lower than on DraftKings. Yeah. So, like, when people are like, oh, it's on the where's the correlation? Oh, you're going to bet? Like, dude, on FanDuel, you combine the soft pricing, right? Because now you have soft pricing, which means you'll have, like, 20 players that are all, like, great projected. Like, like everyone's projected well. And then the correlation doesn't matter. So, like, I brought up the fact that, like if you played a Falcons-Bucks stack, I said this on the morning grind, and he played Ryan Ridley, Gage Evans, which would have been the nuts 3+1 from that game. On DK, you get 103.7 points. On FanDuel, you get 84.2. It's like a 20-point difference because you're not getting the full point PPR, and you're not getting the bonuses. So, like, in that stack, there's 3 bonuses in that stack. The quarterback, that Ridley's bonus, Evans' bonus, and Ridley had 10 catches. Gage had 5 and Evans had 6. So that's another 10.5 points that you don't get on FanDuel. So the benefits of correlation on FanDuel are I don't play much on FanDuel. I don't play any GPPs this whole year on FanDuel. The reason I play on DraftKings is because stuff like correlation and leverage matters more on DraftKings, and that suits my strengths. FanDuel, exactly. Right? Even for NBA, for a lot of the sports with the soft pricing and the scoring system differences, is that like it's jamming in the best plays is more likely to work because of the way everything's set up, and more people do that. So like that's so like when it comes to that, like, can you find the 8-1 offset? Well, yeah, I mean you can. You can build enough good. I always describe FanDuel as you could probably build 100 lineups that are within 2 points of one another because the pricing is so soft. Like between the projections, like I could build 100 lineups, correlation or not correlation, that are all within two median. I mean, like just like so little different. On DraftKings, like that 2 point, that's like your first 20 line. That's it. Like now you're starting to get into 3 points away, 4 points away, 5 points away. So that's when, in order to make up the difference of being 5 points off the median, you need to add correlation. You need to add something to increase your variance like that. So on FanDuel, since I could build 150 lineups that I'm not sacrificing all that much median, which means that if I'm taking a guy out and I'm going to be 5 points behind just to get the correlation, I'm actually hurting myself too much. If the pricing got sharper if it got tighter on FanDuel, it would now it would make somewhat more of a difference. If the scoring system had bonuses, now it would make it more of a difference. So, like, I look at Chop's lineup, and it doesn't seem like much correlation there. It's FanDuel. You don't you don't need it. You never need it. Like, it's not like I correlate all my lineups with this correlation, a secondary one, and this one. Like, all that's doing is increasing your variance. It's not increasing your score. It depends on what happens in the games. And anyone could go off at any time. I played DeAndre Swift instead of Marvin Jones. Like I did that. So I just want to highlight that, like, it's using correlation and leverage alongside projection. It's still, at the end of the day, projection. If you're gonna, I'm gonna correlate my lineup, Eric. Okay, this is gonna be an awesome lineup. I'm gonna play Tua with Bowden and Durham Smythe, and run that back with Sony Michel. and then I'm gonna play Jalen Rager on one side and Larry Fitzgerald on the other side of that game. Like, do you see what I'm talking about? Like, yeah, you're right. The lineup is correlated. If you actually looked at your projections, that lineup has a projection that's like 40 points below like your cash lineup. I mean, like those players, the individual those players don't project well. Like none of what you're putting in even projects well. So yes, they're correlated. But can you make up 40 median points just on no? The correlation doesn't work. I mean, we're talking about a boost of 5 or 10% every time.
Right. That's
right. Like a quarterback wide receiver is the highest correlation. And that's like, and how does that, if you get a touch, like the difference between like Ryan put up 30 points on DK, Ridley put up 35 points, and they share like a total of 12 points. Like between the yardage and the bonuses and everything like that. But a median lineup in NFL is 150 points. So like, that's less than 10%. That's what, 7%? So yes, 7% of your overall score will come out of correlation. But I mean, a winning score in GPP is like 220. So what is 12 points? That's what, 5%? 4%? So
yeah.
By adding the correlation, you're now boosting your overall score potential by as much as 5%. And the secondary correlation maybe 3%. Another running back defense correlation, which doesn't matter all that much, maybe 1%. So you're giving yourself like a little, you're increasing your variance of your lineup by 8%, maybe 10%. You're double stacking. You're running it back, right? Your potential. That's the one standard deviation outcome. So in a lineup that could potentially score 200, up to 20 points could come out of your correlation. Up to, right? Like the average of that may be 7. So when people are like, they're jamming in, like, oh, I got to correlate all my lineups. I go, no, I don't correlate all my lineups. They go, why? But you're the one that talks about correlation all the time. It's like, yes, in relation to their projection, the full lineup, and same thing for leverage. When you hear it all the time, by just normal content people, like you don't have to play like 2% owned guys in your lineup, right? Like that's just too much. Like obviously they're 2% owned for a reason. They don't project well. Yeah. So by playing 8 of them in your lineup, like you're doing the same thing as over correlating. Yes, my cumulative ownership is 40%. My projection is also 50 points lower than everyone else's. And I'm going to just make it up with relative value. Like that, you're not going to make up that many points by playing.
I've actually found that subject is really interesting to me because I've actually found my best teams or when I do the best or when I end up with 5 to 15% owned guys. I'm not going because they typically, not always, right? Caveats. Typically, those like 5 to 15% guys, they actually do project well.
Right. They're big enough.
It's good enough. You know, they're not the 50%. They don't project as well as the 50% owned guy, but they project well enough, right? Let's call Miles Sanders this week, right?
Well, Miles Sanders didn't project.
Whatever. I liked him.
Right. Say you liked him. Just say you had a hunch. That's fine.
He just happened to come to. What about David Johnson? Can I say
no? David Johnson actually projected halfway decently. Yeah. Yes.
There we go. Because I like David Johnson too. David Johnson projects pretty well. He's 5% compared to whatever Pollard's 30%. But he projects pretty well. And then you start to add on all that relative value and the correlation boost and all.
Well, look at David Montgomery. David Montgomery he was on my radar. He just didn't make the cut.
Yep.
Like David Montgomery did not project poorly for 7,000, right. And if you played him, you got rewarded. So, but the overall point that I'm making is that I always describe them as levers: projection, correlation, and leverage. That it's not a matter of like, well, I pulled a correlation leverage, where's my money? I pulled a leverage lever, where's my money? It's a balance of how much projection are you willing to sacrifice for increased variance, right? Increased leverage is more about, leapfrogging relative value-wise on a leaderboard. Mm-hmm. Correlation is more about when one event happens, another event happens. More likely to happen. Like that's a better way of putting it. But it still comes down to that you have projections that are a normal distribution, a range of outcomes. You're looking at a median. And it's like, How much projection am I willing to give up for these other things? In a perfect world, it would be zero. But you can't. But that never happened. I mean, you can't. You're rarely ever going to find. You're not going to find that. Like if you build your cash lineup with your top optimal from your projections, like you can't beat that lineup from a median perspective. Of course, that lineup typically has no relative value and no correlation, and quite possibly duplicated in a contest because it's so highly owned in that combination because it's a double up lineup. You don't play it. So you're like, okay, I'm going to play that lineup, but switch one guy. It's like, well, that in and of itself, like you're still sharing players with way too many people. Like, yeah, you gave up 0.2 in projection to get that difference. And that's about as much difference as you're getting. So now you have to think in terms of how much more am I willing to give up? And then people DM me and they go, well, what's the most amount that you could give up? Well, there's no specific number. It all depends on the contest. This week, for instance, my cash lineup had like a median in my projection. The numbers don't matter. You have to find your baseline based on your projections. Because if I project Tony Pollard 5 points more than you do, like my top lineup is going to be much higher than yours in a number. Right. But you just have to. What's the top number in your model? The top numbers in your model is 148. And mine's 158, like that doesn't mean anything. It's just like that you're just doing lineups in relation to one another. Mm-hmm. So like the top lineup in my model was like 155 for like my cash lineup. So like if I'm playing like the Millie Maker, you may be willing to give up 20 median point. You may. I mean, if to get super leverage, super contrarian correlation. Because you're playing for $1 million. But this week when I was going through lineups and running through iterations, like I said to myself, like any lineup that's like below 145, like I'm almost not going to consider. Because I'm playing a 1,000-man power sweep. I'm playing, a 4,000-man red zone. I mean, like I'm not playing the slant with 65,000 people in it, with entries into it. So like that's why I'm going through. I go through those just to see who to get rid of. Like I'm like leverage. Like to me, I found the leverage at Ryan Tannehill, like Ryan Tannehill plus Corey Davis, doing that type of stack with DeAndre Swift. Like that's what I was gonna do. Mm-hmm. Tannehill didn't project all that well. AJ Brown didn't project well at all. Right. Jonnu Smith wasn't really that viable. Swift didn't project. I mean, he was okay. Marvin Jones was okay. And I started running through lineups and like all these Tannehill lineups are showing up at like 142, 144, 140. Like no matter, I could jam in all the time. I could jam in Kamara. Obviously, I didn't have Pollard available to me at the point I was doing this. But I was just jamming and stuff. And I'm like I'm not playing Derrick Henry. And it's just like, all these lineups are just showing up too low in comparison to my naked Hurts, naked Murray. Like those lineups are showing up 148, 149, 150. And I'm like, is this leverage worth me playing Ryan Tannehill? And I decided no. It made more sense to plug. It was a higher projected lineup if I took Jalen Hurts and put him in Ryan Tannehill's spot and still play Corey Davis and DeAndre Swift. Right. So that made my decision. I'm running through 300 lineups. I'm just iterating, going, okay, let me run it this way. Let me run it this way. I know I'm not taking the CSV. I'm not putting it in. I'm not building 100 lineups. I'm using the optimizer as a tool for research. Mm-hmm. Going, let's say, okay, I want to play Christian Kirk. Christian Kirk projected poorly in my projections. So I'm like, I want to see if I could play a Murray, Kirk, Goddard build, right?
Yep.
Something like that. So I lock them all in and I run 300 lineups. And I see what comes up on top. And I go, okay, well, I'm fading Derrick Henry, so I'm not going to play this top lineup. And then I click on Derrick Henry. I go, let me see the first lineup without Derrick Henry. And I take a look at that lineup and I go, like, I'm going to be playing Chalk. In order to play this lineup, I need to play Chalk Kamara, Chalk Sanders, Chalk Ayuk, Leonard Fournette. And I go, like, I'm not getting enough leverage. Now, like, this lineup is just not getting enough leverage because Kyler's going to be popular. I mean, like, Jalen, all these guys are going to be popular. So I'm like, okay, let me now take out Goddard and run it with let me just run Christian Kirk as a secondary core. Like, let me run Kirk with Hurts and do that. And go, okay, can I get that? And then I ran that, and then I still see, like, in order to play Christian Kirk at his projection, I need to play like Derrick Henry and Emmanuel said. Like, I had to play the higher projected, higher owned guys, and I had to think to myself, is Christian Kirk worth playing by himself like that? And I said no, but he's worth it in a Kyler Murray stack. Like, once I put Murray, Kirk, and no Goddard, because Goddard didn't project well enough, because now in the tight end spot, I could put in Travis Kelce and get my projection way up, and there were cheap enough wide receivers that I could play Kelce in that lineup. So that once I saw Murray, Kirk, and because Kirk was like on a salary adjusted value, he was like as a plus minus. Labs does this as well as RG. They show the RGV, which is the plus or minus expected points based on their salary adjusted value. Christian Kirk was like -3, which typically I don't play players at -3. The only time that I will is if I could play them in a lineup correlatively, because I'm going to make up those 3 points through correlation. So the only way I can play Christian Kirk is if I play him with Kyler Murray. So I lock them in without Goddard now, and I run it, and I see some lineups at like 147, 148, and I'm like, I think this could be doable. I don't like it as much because I think I'm giving up a little too much projection, but I like that game. I'm like, yes, if I plugged in Hopkins, those lineups came in at 150, 151. I'm like, I'm good with I have that. But also, that's going to be the popular way to build that game. So if Hopkins fails, who succeeds? Christian Kirk. And if Christian Kirk succeeds and Hopkins fails, maybe it's because Murray has rushed it in twice. Right. Yep. So now, even though Christian Kirk projects poorly, I've now built the lineup that has enough median for the contest that I'm in. Like, I wouldn't mind Christian Kirk in a lineup with a median of 147 if I was playing the slant. Yeah. Like I didn't mind, but I know I'm playing 1,000 to 4,000 entry. Like, I don't need to sacrifice that much. I could get unique enough. I had lineups that are 75 cumulative ownership. I mean, in a 4,000 person contest. I mean, I'm fine. Once I fade Henry in a lineup, I'm fading Kamara in a lineup. I mean, like I'm good. Like this.
Yep.
Right. If I'm not playing Kamara, I'm playing Jared Cook. If I'm not playing Kamara, I'm playing Emmanuel Sanders. Right. If I'm not playing Kelce, I'm playing Hill. You know, I'm mixing that up, and I'm already unique enough. I mean, I'm sitting there with 70-80% cumulative ownership. Like that's well more than enough. I could be even chalkier in those types of contests. So this is what I mean. This if you go through the course, it doesn't get this granular. This maybe I'm going to save this for the advanced course or something. But this is the way to use the tools, because that's the concept. The overall concept when it comes to lineup building for GPPs. Can I get a lineup that's as good as my cash lineup that's lower owned? And how much lower owned can I, because your cash lineup is typically going to be the highest median. I mean, the one that maximizes for median, not ceiling and floor outcomes. So can I get, if the top lineup in NBA today or whatever, tomorrow, if you're playing, and I go through my projections and the medians of everything in my projections adds up to 280, right? I'm now for GPP, I'm looking, can I find lineups that are close to 280 that have half the ownership in the lineups, right? And on slates where there's not like mega chalk, because there's no like 1-2 projected players that are just like you got to jam these guys in, you'll find that more often because like people gravitate towards a player that's like a half a point higher projected, and like that's the value play of the slate, and it's like no, like the difference between this guy and the next 2 guys is not all that much, and this guy's going to be 30% owned, the other guy's going to be 10% owned, and then you go through your model and you go, wow, the top median is 280, and I could find a lineup that is half his own for 277, and you're like, am I willing to give up 3 points in basketball? Yeah, of course I am. 3 points in a game where, I mean, you're going to score 300 points in your lineup. I mean, that's like 1% of your score. So yeah, obviously, let me start banging these lineups into contests. I mean, but that's mathematically that is what you're doing. And this is what I mean by lineups, not players. Because I posed this question. I was in the RG Discord last night explaining this in the NFL channel because people were asking questions. I just said, if you have two lineups and they both have, in football, 155 total median, and a second lineup, 155 total median. The first lineup has 120% cumulative ownership. Second lineup has 60% cumulative ownership. Which one do you take? Right, the second one.
Mm-hmm.
And they get it. It's like, okay, I get it. Obviously, there are nuances to these numbers. Every player has a different standard deviation. Cumulative ownership is not like the best judge. Like, because obviously the product matters because you could have high owned players and then a 1% owned player. So,
right.
like, it's a blunt tool. I always say this, like, and I don't want to explain the nuance in it first. I want you to get the overall concept first. So, but that wasn't the important question, like, of the ownership, like the difference of the two lineups. And I said, did I have to tell you what players are in those lineups? And he goes, no. He said, would it matter to you? If I never told you who the players are in those lineups, you're still taking lineup B. And he goes, yes. I go, okay, lineups, not players. Like, what? So as long as there's no players in there that are probably negatively correlated, that limits my ceiling of that lineup. But outside of that, like, what? I said those lineups could possibly share 6 players in them. They most likely do. Actually, they probably most likely do. If it's a 9-person lineup, they probably share 6 or 7 players because they're the highest projected players.
Same projection, yeah.
Right, obviously. But, like, now once you get into, like, what's the difference between a lineup that's at 155 and a lineup that's 153? Like, once you move it down 2 points, the difference between those two lineups could be 6 players. They could share, like, 2 or 3 and then 6 completely different players from one another. And the lineup only has a 2-point less median. So if I gave you the choice of, if I could find lineups like that for you to play in large field GPPs, I mean, even smaller field for that difference, would you take them? Like, the answer should be yes. And the answer should be yes, and I don't even care what the players are. Right? Because you're viewing it at, so when people think in terms, I mean, to me, this is very basic stuff. So sometimes me and you, Eric, we talk a little bit maybe past some of the audience, and sometimes the audience is smart, and they're like, "Why are you guys talking about this? We all know this." I mean,
yeah, you idiots.
Right,
you
exactly.
Idiots.
But there are new people that show up and go, "I want to learn." Thinking in terms of, do you play Derrick Henry at 30% owned? And thinking about it that way is the wrong way to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
You could play Derrick Henry in a lineup in a small field or large field GPP. You could not play him. You could probably find lineups that are 5 points off the top median that have Henry in it, and ones that don't have Henry in it. Right? There are ones that are high owned. There are ones that are low owned. Can you find a low enough owned lineup with a high enough projection that has Derrick Henry in it? Then play him. Can you find ones that the same vector that don't have Derrick Henry in it? Well, technically, if in a utopian, if everything mathematically worked out and both lineups had the same probability of winning and the same median, the same ceiling, the same everything, same ownership, the same contest you're playing, they both have the same expected value. So, like, you'd look at a lineup and go, this lineup has Derrick Henry, this lineup doesn't have Derrick Henry. They both have the same expectation. So when you're thinking in terms of, do I play Henry or do I not play Henry, like, you're thinking in terms of players. Like, think in terms of lineups. Now, I made the decision that I'm not going to build any lineups with Derrick Henry. That was the decision I could have. I could have gone through and gone through and said, oh, let me take a look at the Henry lineups. I did that at the beginning. Let me take a look at the best non-Henry lineup if I fade him. And I saw that I could make plenty of good lineups without him. So I said, if I'm making 18 lineups, fuck it. I'm not going to play him.
People really think, so you're kind of talking through, we talked through both things, but the end result being finding lineups, right? Finding smart tournament lineups is basically what that end result that you just described. But there is a process that everyone has to go through to get there, right? And you do have to make tons of decisions to get to build those lineups, right? And
Right.
everybody has a little bit different process, but you have to make a ton of decisions.
Right, but you're making, I just want to highlight the fact that you're making it more, you're doing the same thing I'm doing, but you're doing it in your head intuitively, and I'm doing it through I'm looking through and running simulations and optimize, like where I could do it in my head also. I just I look at it and go, I see what the top projected people. Right,
I could do it the way that you do.
Right, exactly. Like we're doing it the same exact way.
Yeah.
So like when Chop wins the $1 million, he's doing the same exact. We're all doing the concepts. We may not verbalize them the same way. Like you could listen to Chop on a show and be like, I like this guy. Like when he says he likes this guy, no, that guy projects higher than his ownership. Like it's the same concept. He's looking at going like, how do I fade the Saints? He could maybe think, the Saints suck or whatever, but he's still using the same concept of I'm going to fade Kamara, I'm going to fade Henry, and it's like, dude, I can do whatever I want now on FanDuel because I faded like the 2 highest owned running backs. Like he's doing the same exact thing conceptually. I may be going through a little bit more of the math. He may be going more by feel, but we're getting to the same place. It's still the same concepts and the same thought process. You're doing it in smaller field, so it's not a matter of like this is my way and this is your way. There is only one way. Yep. Like it's just a matter of how you get to that answer, and also realizing that there could be 1,000 answers.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say and that's why people get so hung up on the Derrick Henry is the best example because he's so polarizing. He's such a weird archetype of a fantasy play that people get so fixated on that. Do I have to play Derrick Henry this week or do I not have to? And the answer is literally always it doesn't matter. Like
it depends on the lineup that you're playing.
Yes and no. The people get so hung up, not to call out the people on Twitter, but that's what it becomes because it's easy to just say like, oh, you played Derrick Henry, you're a fish, or oh, you didn't play Derrick Henry, you're a fish. But like you said, none of that matters. But I think people lose sight of the end goal of what we're all trying to do, and that is just to make good tournament lineups and good tournament like we all have to make a decision on whether it's certain players or certain stacks or certain whatever. Y'all have to everybody has to make a decision. And we all make different decisions, right? If I came in and I said I played Derrick Henry and all my teams, and you were like, nope, I wrote off Derrick Henry. That doesn't mean anything. We both could be technically right, but that's because we were looking to get to the same destination. We just happened to use, different directions to get there. And people get caught up in each little direction, each little decision point being what we really need to focus on. And it's never what we really need to focus on, right? Because there is almost no right answer, almost being the key word. There are certain things that you probably shouldn't do, but even then, like just about everything is debatable. Like we'll come on here and we'll play totally different lineups in a week or totally disagree on something, but we both have the exact same end goal in mind, whether we executed perfectly or not, and whether we agreed on the directions that got us there. But
yeah, I could run your lineups like from a mathematical standpoint. I could probably take your lineups, your original lineups at least, not the ones that you late swapped to, and run your lineups through my projections. And your Mitch Trubisky lineup could have a median of 147, and one of my lineups that has 9 completely different guys. Mm-hmm. Right? Completely have a 147 also. And we both look at this lineup with the similar ownership levels, similar median, and go, well, I understand why you made this line. I mean, like, I didn't choose any of your players. Yet I understand your line. Like this is a good lineup. I didn't choose this one. I choose this one. Over the like you could have made a Derrick Henry line. You could have made 18 Derrick Henry lineups that all have the same shot at winning as my lineups did. It's just that in your Derrick Henry lineups, you were fading Ayuk, right? Yeah. I had Ayuk. You didn't have Ayuk. You didn't have any DeAndre Hopkins because you were playing Henry. Like you're balancing out that leverage and projection by going, well, if I'm playing Kamara and Henry in the same lineup, I can't play DeAndre Hopkins, obviously, because you can't spend up on him, probably. Yeah. But now that I'm playing David Johnson and Tony Pollard in my lineup, I have Ridley and Hopkins in my lineup. But from a median perspective, you look and they go like it's about the same. Like we both got to a lineup that has about the same expected value and it has 7 different players in it. And that's the thing. To think very non-linearly like that, right? You're thinking very abstract. It's conceptual thinking of. It's very unnatural for most people to think in terms of how could 2 lineups have all different players and still be equal to one another. And it's like, no, that is it. That's why there are 1,000 potential answers on a given slate, and we could both play different lineups and still both be right in theory.
Yeah. The theory of DFS.
Right, that's what it is. And you could pick up the course. Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports, the 15-hour audio DFS Masterclass. If you're listening today or watching today, there's a code NBA, $10 off. We're starting with NBA, you get $10 off. I don't wait around for offer codes. I don't give them out that often. So I always have to say that because people DM me and they say, "Is there a promo?" Like it's worth the money that it is. So like I'm not going to constantly discount it. But on the start of a new season, okay, fine. NBA, it's Christmas time. I'm going to be a little bit giving, Eric. Right? It's Christmas time. So if you want $10 off by just the end of today, the end of the 22nd, in Eastern time. So get that in if you're listening now. If you're listening a day late, then day late, dollar short. Too bad. You're screwed. But you could follow Erik Beimfohr on Twitter at Blender HD. We got one more real week left. Do you consider week 17 to be a real week?
No.
Because so many people don't play.
It's bad. It's rough.
But I thought you like no. Hold on. You like shit show DFS.
Yeah. But this is a very different kind of shit. Week 17 is a very different kind of shit show than like we talked about preseason NBA. Preseason is like a shit show. I don't even know how to describe it, so I'm not even going to do it justice by putting it to words. But I also think it's probably just like fatigue by the time we get to week 17.
Oh, okay.
Like,
I
get it.
Was
week 1, if it was week 1, but by the time we get to week 17, it's like, okay, I just did this for 3 or 4 months. I'm tired. And now it's like the most grueling slate ever because it's all backups and it's a total disaster, And I can't recall if I've even done well in week 17. I really have no idea. Probably because of that fatigue. By the time we get to week 17, I'm just like, God, put me out of my misery. I'm so done with this.
Okay, but we'll be around. I think that'll be a fun week to talk about because
I think so.
That you'll need to not take a late news snooze during that week.
Yeah, no kidding.
So until next time, there's been another episode of the Theory of DFS podcast.